teaching that it seems to be such a concern. We have not dictated that in Georgia. I know in some of the Common Core expectations, you will see that 50-50 recommendation. It is merely a suggestion, and teachers, again, get to choose how they creatively deliver a standard. Now, that is certainly influenced by a school system. We do have the issue of the local control where districts do define certain issues at the district level. But this state has not defined that. We give teachers suggested resources that they can go to different links, different websites, different even states to take a look at resources. But we do not dictate that.
Make sure we all understand this. The State Board of Education determines standards. That's it. Your local school board determines your curriculum. I listened to Alvin Wilbanks say that about 10 times the other night in Gwinnett County, where 10% of your kids in the state go to school. And they look at it with an advocacy group, with parents, and everything else. So all your state does is approve the standards. It's also what Governor Deal said. Our state will always approve the standards. It's part of our education policy. It's in our Constitution. So let's not confuse the two here, folks. Let's not muddy the waters. That's how it's done right now, and how it will be done in the state of Georgia.
I'm just going to ask a question. Would the adoption of the Common Core standards limit the freedom and flexibility of our local school boards to determine the curriculum?
I just answered that.
The question is, now they have a certain level of freedom to determine their own curriculum. If we adopt fully the Common Core standards, will they have greater or lesser freedom to adopt their own curriculum at the local level?
Is it me?
Yeah.
It's us.
I'll ask you. Yeah,
I think I just answered that. Gwinnett County is a classic example. Alvin Wilbanks, every year has his advocacy group. They look at their curriculum and make some changes, and that will continue. All the state school board does is adopt standards. Governor Deal has said that. It's not about instruction. It's not about curriculum. That remains a local function. Read the executive order. It makes it very clear. Some people may actually bring legislation to make sure that happens. But that's how it is. I mean, that doesn't change.
So you're saying it will have no effect at all on the ability of Gwinnett County to determine their own curriculum?
What Gwinnett or any other school system does do, they do adhere to the standards, but then they would choose how to support frameworks for their teachers, resources for their teachers. They might go as far as pacing guides. They might do lesson planning collaboratively with their teachers. That is the how relative to the standard that they are.
Okay, and Common Core does not change that flexibility at all. Can I ask, do you all want to comment on that?
If a local school board wanted to choose a classical curriculum, the kind that works, the kind that's heavy on classic literature, the kind that teaches standard algorithms in the first grade, that sort of thing, they can't do it under Common Core. They can't do it. They are dictated how they're going to teach math in the early years. We had a teacher, a middle school teacher who talked to us at the state GOP convention, who said he's a math teacher, and he said his principal had told him he needed to switch to the project method of teaching. He said, I don't teach math that way. It doesn't work for math. And they said, it doesn't matter. Common Core requires it. A teacher who wants to focus 90% on classic literature cannot do that under Common Core. So Common Core puts tremendous parameters on what people teach and how they teach it. And so the dichotomy between curriculum and standards in real life, and really the way it works, just isn't that way. We know that English teachers in one large county have been told you will spend 55% of your time on nonfiction informational text. That's what they were told. And so that's what they do. It's a bureaucratic exercise. They will count the standards. They will say there are 10 for informational text and there are 9 for literature, and therefore that's what you will teach. And that's what they're being told. All this flexibility that supposedly is there is just not working on the ground.
So my assessment of this is that this is an extremely important question and deserves a lot of further thought by all of us that are interested, further thought and research, but a key question. And do I have time, do you think, for one more? Okay, one more. Okay.
Could we just have one more
Okay.
second on this? Just everything that Ms. Robbins just described is still district decision, folks. It's a local decision. So yes, when she described whether a school system could, or a school or a teacher could decide to do a classical curriculum, that would not adhere to the standard. She is absolutely accurate there. But everything that we're describing here would be a district implementation. I don't believe you want to take away that creativity so that districts have the right to make some decisions that are customized to their communities. All we're talking about is a set of standards. And again, the standards, and we will, as we study them with our state board, I project to you that we're going to find that most stakeholders in this state have not had a problem with the standards. They have had a problem in many cases with the implementation of the standards.
Thank you. I don't know if we're at the trust but verify stage here, but again, it's a really important question and really deserves careful examination and continued discussion, I think, just not here. And I guess a final question is a couple of cards here. I understand that the Common Core violates at least 3 federal laws against U.S. intervention in state education. Why is there any Common Core? And also a similar question, why would Georgia be encouraged with payment of $400 million in order to accept the Common Core? So the question about how it's being handled, how it's being delivered, and does it really violate any constitutional or the Constitution or federal laws? Let me start over there. And let's do 2 minutes, 2 minutes. Yeah.
Are they talking about race to the top of the floor debate?
I'm just reading the question, so we'll just have to do what you want with it. Common Core violates, I understand they violate these 3 U.S. intervention in state education. Why is there any Common Core, and why would Georgia be paid for only $400 million to get the philosophy for the philosophy adopted? Excuse me.
Well, as I mentioned before in the opening, the United States Department of Education Act, it says that the Department of Education will not exercise direction, supervision over curriculum, program of instruction, or administration of schools. And it goes on to give a further discussion about how it's to support local decisions and local education and the state's right to direct its education of its children. The federal government is involved in Common Core because they're providing the funding. And if you don't comply with the requirements of that grant, they're also providing the enforcement of it. And so, in a way, by saying, okay, we're going to have a consortium of states, it's kind of like an unofficial Congress that said, okay, the states are going to do this, that voted on it, and the federal government is providing the money, giving the states the money to do it. Well, that's going against the spirit of that law. So yes, I think it violates the spirit, if not the letter of the law.
One thing that's interesting about the Race to the Top funding, and we got Race to the Top funding, by the way, the people who paid for our application. An application for Race to the Top was not like filling out just a work application or something. It's hundreds of pages. It's pretty impressive. The people who paid for that were the Gates Foundation. They paid for Georgia's Race, or at least part of Georgia's Race to the Top application. But we calculated on what it was going to cost us, what we needed this grant money for. It would cost us $399 million to implement all the stuff in the grant. So they gave us $400 million so that we could pay for these things that we wouldn't have to pay for if we weren't getting the grant. Does this seem circular to anybody else? But it was one of the legislators in Tennessee last week when we were up there said that up there they called it Race to the Trough. And that's what it was. We wanted the money, we went into Common Core.
Okay, thank you. Your 2 minutes?
I will just clarify, and I was certainly one of the many folks who worked on the Race to the Top application. But just be mindful of the fact that we defined our own application. We were not told, what to do with any monies. We wrote that as a proposal, and we're one of those first states to be funded under Race to the Top. Ms. Robbins is right in one respect. We were provided, I think 4 states, where I was trying to think back how many, were provided with some consulting services. And those were awards that I do believe the Gates Foundation paid for, but they were really, again, just sort of helpers in the regard. Believe me, they didn't write our application. Lots of man hours went into that application. And again, we wrote it to define what we wanted to do in critical areas where Georgia was really making a great attempt to grow, but were very severely limited in funds. Our economic base in our state had really taken a hit with education.
You might want to check with the 26 school systems that got the Race to the Top grants and ask them if they think that the monies were worthwhile. You might want to look at your student information system that we now have, that we wasted hundreds of millions of dollars on, that we now have. Again, Race to the Top funds. You might want to talk to the people locally in the state of Georgia who you consider smart in education, like in Alvin Wilbanks, like Buster up in Forsyth County, wherever, and see what they think of what Race to the Top made and the difference it made for their kids and the kids' education with those funds.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much to the audience. Can you see the stack of really excellent questions here? And I hope that we got out as many of these issues as we possibly could. And I think got some pretty interesting answers. So now we're going to go into the segment of closing statements, which will be 5 minutes per person. We're going to go in the reverse order of the way we started. So Senator Ligon will begin, and then Ms. Robbins, and then Dr. Reichrath, and last Senator Miller. Senator Ligon.
So, sometimes when you're trying to understand something, it helps to think of it in a different context. Imagine if when 4 years ago, when the stimulus money were given to the Department of Education, were instead given to the Department of Transportation. And they got with the National Governors Association, and they said, we'll create this program, and we're going to have common roads throughout America, the Race to Common Roads. And so we'll give you $100 million if you'll do this, but we're going to require you to do some things. We will determine what roads and bridges you build. Now, we're not going to tell you how to do that. That'll be up to you. But we'll determine what road you can build and which ones you can repair. Oh, by the way, there'll be a few other things that you have to do. We'll try to make it common with other states. Your roads are good in Georgia, but South Carolina has a lot of cracks in its road, and Louisiana's are kind of wavy, so our standards will require you to have a few cracks and waves in your roads, just like the other states, to even it out. Would we have done that? That's crazy. Well, education is the road to our children's future. And the standards direct that road. And the way it is right now, if there's a bridge that's out in those standards, guess what?